There's a pattern that repeats itself quietly in people's lives. It doesn't always look dramatic. It doesn't always come with obvious warning signs. Sometimes it looks like staying in a relationship you already know isn't right. Sometimes it looks like going back to someone who already showed you who they are. Sometimes it's not even about people. It's staying in habits, environments, and identities that drain you, even when you know there's something better. And when you step back and really look at it, the question becomes uncomfortable. If you want peace, why do you keep choosing pain? Not consciously, not intentionally, but consistently. That question forces you into a deeper truth. You are not always choosing what's best for you. You are choosing what feels familiar. And familiarity, even when it hurts, feels safe. That's the part most people never confront. Because once you do, you realize the problem isn't just what's happening around you. It's what's happening inside you. Your mind is wired for what it knows, not what is good for you. The first thing you need to understand is this. Your brain doesn't prioritize happiness. It prioritizes survival, and survival is based on recognition. If something feels familiar, your brain labels it as safe, even if it's objectively harmful. This is why someone can grow up in an environment filled with tension, inconsistency or emotional distance, and later find themselves drawn to the exact same dynamics in adulthood. Not because they want the pain, but because their system recognizes it. It knows how to navigate it. Peace, on the other hand, doesn't come with a map. It doesn't come with scripts you've practiced. It doesn't give you predictable emotional patterns, and because of that, it can feel unsettling. You could be in a situation where nothing is wrong, where you're respected, where things are stable, and still feel uneasy. Not because something is missing, but because something is unfamiliar. A practical way to recognize this in your own life is to pay attention to your reactions when things are calm. Do you relax into it, or do you start searching for problems? Do you trust it, or do you question it? That impulse to disrupt peace is often your system trying to return to what it understands. And the first step in breaking that pattern is simply noticing it without acting on it. Familiar pain gives you a false sense of control. There's another layer to this. Familiar pain isn't just recognizable, it's predictable. If you've experienced certain patterns enough times, you learn how they work. You know what to expect. You know how people will respond. You know how the situation will unfold. And that predictability creates a sense of control. Even if the outcome is negative, it's known. And what's known feels manageable. Unknown peace doesn't offer that. It removes the script. It removes the predictability. It asks you to trust something you haven't experienced enough to understand. And that lack of control can feel more threatening than the pain you already know how to handle. This is why people stay in toxic situations longer than they should. Not because they enjoy the pain, but because they understand it. To move out of this, you have to redefine what control actually means. Control isn't knowing exactly what will happen. It's trusting your ability to handle whatever does happen. That shift takes time, but it starts with small decisions. Choosing not to respond the way you always do. Choosing not to go back to what you already know isn't good for you. Choosing to sit in uncertainty instead of escaping it. Each time you do that, you build a new kind of stability. You are not just remembering your past, you are repeating it. A lot of what you experience in the present is shaped by what you didn't fully process in the past. Your mind, well, it looks for patterns. It tries to resolve unfinished emotional experiences by recreating similar situations. If you felt ignored, you may find yourself in situations where you feel overlooked again. If you had to earn approval, you may keep overextending yourself, trying to prove your worth. This isn't random. It's repetition. There's a part of you that is trying to get a different outcome from a familiar situation. But without awareness, the outcome rarely changes. To break this cycle, you have to start identifying the patterns. Look at your life honestly, not just at what's happening, but at what keeps happening. What emotions show up repeatedly? What types of situations do you find yourself in over and over again? Once you identify the pattern, the next step is to pause when it starts to repeat. Instead of reacting automatically, create space. Ask yourself, is this familiar or is this healthy? That one question can interrupt years of unconscious repetition. Peace feels uncomfortable because you haven't learned how to trust it. Peace is often misunderstood. People think it's something you instantly recognize and settle into. But if your baseline has been shaped by instability or emotional intensity, peace can feel unfamiliar. And, unfamiliar can feel unsafe. This is why people confuse peace with boredom. They leave stable situations because they don't feel the same emotional highs and lows they're used to. They interpret the absence of chaos as the absence of connection. But in reality, they're experiencing something their system hasn't learned to process yet. Peace is steady. It's consistent. It doesn't spike your emotions in extreme ways. And if you're used to intensity, that can feel like something is missing. To adjust to this, you have to give yourself time. Instead of judging the calm, observe it. Notice how it affects your body. Notice the absence of stress. Notice the space it creates. The more you allow yourself to experience it without rejecting it, the more familiar it becomes. And over time, what once felt uncomfortable starts to feel natural. You may be unconsciously addicted to emotional intensity. There's a reason why chaos can feel addictive. It stimulates you. It keeps you engaged. It creates emotional highs that feel powerful, even if they're followed by lows. If that pattern has been consistent in your life, your system can start to crave it. Not because it's good for you, but because it's stimulating. Peace doesn't offer that same intensity. It's quieter, more stable, less reactive. And that can feel underwhelming if you're used to constant emotional movement. This is where people sabotage themselves. They create problems where there are none. They overanalyze stable situations. They go back to environments that trigger stronger emotional responses. Because at some level, intensity feels like aliveness. To shift this, you have to redefine what fulfillment feels like. Instead of chasing emotional highs, start valuing emotional stability. Pay attention to how you feel over time, not just in the moment. Does this situation leave you feeling grounded, or does it leave you drained? That question matters more than whether something feels exciting. Letting go of familiar pain means letting go of a version of yourself. This is one of the hardest parts. When you choose something different, you're not just changing your environment, you're changing your identity. The version of you that learned to survive familiar pain developed certain traits. Maybe you became hyper-aware of others. Maybe you learned to suppress your needs. Maybe you became independent to the point where you stopped relying on anyone. Those traits helped you, they protected you, but they may not serve you anymore. And letting them go can feel like losing a part of yourself, even if that part is tied to pain. This is why growth often feels like grief. You're not just moving forward, you're leaving something behind. To move through this, you need to acknowledge it. Recognize the role those traits played in your life. Understand why they developed. Then ask yourself if they're still necessary. That question creates space for change. The fear of the unknown will always try to pull you back. Every time you move towards something unfamiliar, you will feel resistance, doubt, fear, hesitation. That's normal. Your mind is trying to protect you from uncertainty. But protection isn't always aligned with growth. If you let that fear dictate your decisions, you will keep returning to what you know, even if what you know isn't good for you. To move forward, you have to change your relationship with fear. Instead of seeing it as a signal to stop, start seeing it as a signal to examine. Ask yourself, is this fear based on real danger or just unfamiliarity? Most of the time it's the second. And once you recognize that, you can choose differently. Not by eliminating fear, but by acting alongside it. Learning to sit in peace is a skill you have to build. Peace isn't something you arrive at and instantly feel comfortable in. It's something you practice. Just like your system learned to adapt to familiar pain, it can learn to adapt to stability. But that requires consistency. It requires resisting the urge to create chaos when things feel too calm. It requires sitting with discomfort without immediately trying to fix it. One practical way to do this is to create pauses in your reactions. When you feel the urge to go back to old patterns, don't act immediately. Wait. Give yourself space to think. That space is where change happens, because the more you interrupt automatic behavior, the more control you gain. Choosing peace is a long-term decision, not a one-time choice. This isn't something you decide once and never struggle with again. It's a continuous process. There will be moments where familiar pain feels easier, where going back feels more comfortable. That doesn't mean you've failed. It means you're in the process. Each time you choose differently, you reinforce a new pattern. Each time you sit with discomfort instead of escaping it, you build resilience. And over time, the balance shifts. What once felt unfamiliar becomes normal. What once felt comfortable starts to feel limiting. That's when real change happens. Not when everything around you is perfect, but when your internal response to it is different. If this kind of depth is what you're here for, real understanding, real change, no surface-level distractions, then you already know this work isn't easy, but it's necessary. So, if you're serious about breaking these patterns and building something more stable, more grounded and more real, make sure you subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because most people stay in what they know.